Okay, I'll call to order the April 17 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Height. Commissioner Tedda. Here. Commissioner Poland. Here. Commissioner Shernick.
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg. Here. Commissioner Flagg. Here. Commissioner Honoran. Here. Councilmember Rodriguez. Here.
Great. Communications from Planning and Development Services Director Jenny Marsh.
Nothing at this time, Chairman Shernick.
Okay, thank you. Next item is public invited to be heard. If there's somebody in the public who would like to speak on about something that's not on tonight's agenda, now's the time to come forward. We'll give you 5 minutes to speak. So please come forward now if you'd like to. Seeing no one, we'll close the public invited to be heard. Next is approval of our March 2019 minutes. Any discussion or comments? Commissioner Goldberg?
Move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Commissioner Poland?
I'll second that.
We have a second from Commissioner Poland. Any further discussion about the minutes? Let's take a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Next is Prairie Village Filing 7 Preliminary Subdivision Plat, PZR 2019-5 with Principal Planner Eva Parachevsky. Eva, before you start, Commissioner Height needs to make a statement.
Is it working? I do, thank you. As some of my fellow commissioners may recall from the last project that came up before regarding Prairie Village, the project next door to the Village Co-op, I originally represented, I represented in the past, the original developer, Lon LaRue, on matters not relating to the development of the subdivision. Mr. LaRue has since passed. I feel I need to disclose that. As well, too, since the Village Co-op has been approved, I've taken on representation of the Prairie Village HOA in their covenant enforcement and some collection matters. You'll note in your packet on your dais today that the Prairie Village HOA has written explaining their position on an under drain easement. I've not been involved in that, and I don't represent the HOA in matters regarding this particular project. I don't have the HOA's input. Have I heard from any members of the HOA or any members or from the board whether or not they support or not this particular project? But I do feel that's a matter that I needed to disclose. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Height. Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I just wanted to disclose that I'm a resident of the neighboring community, and I feel I can pursue with this item before us and judge without bias, but want to get that on the record.
Thank you. Okay, now for Principal Planner Eva Parachevsky.
Good evening. Let's try this one more time. Good evening, Chair Shernick and Commissioners. Eva Pahajewski, Planning and Development Services. We're going to start with this item. This is a preliminary subdivision plat in Prairie Village. It's the 7th filing. I'm going to go ahead and as usual, I'll walk you through the nuts and bolts of the application and the zoning issues, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant who will discuss the review criteria for the subdivision plat. And so just to start with, so we'll orient you again. For those of you who aren't familiar with Prairie Village, it's bordered by Highway 66 up on the north. This particular property is on the corner of Alpine. So Alpine's here on the east side and Canadian Crossing Drive is here on the west. And this is Olympia here on the south. And this would be the site. It's about 13 acres. And this is a separate parcel that's developed with a single family home under separate ownership. So that's not part of this application. Over here, this is also part of Prairie Village on the west. These are their single family homes. They do have a trail connection that dead ends here, and you'll see how that trail connection will move on with this development. This is also part of Prairie Village on the south side of Olympia, and these are paired homes similar to what you're seeing tonight, in which they're all separately owned lots, but they are sort of in a duplex situation where you have two homes in one building and they share a wall. This is the Village Co-op here on the east that was just mentioned, and that is a, I guess, multifamily project. There are some single-family homes on the perimeter here, and then there's a multifamily building here along Alpine Street. And then this is the Pleasant Valley subdivision, single-family residential to the east of Alpine Street, just to give you some project orientation. And so the zoning of this property is residential mixed neighborhood. And in the comprehensive plan, its land use designation is mixed neighborhood. They're both consistent with one another. And so in this zoning district, there are multiple residential types allowed, ranging from single-family homes to multifamily, duplex, et cetera. And so this particular proposal that's here before you tonight is an allowed use. And the density range that's allowed in the comprehensive plan and in the zoning is a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 8 dwelling units per acre. I apologize, I think I said the site was 13 acres, it's 12.3 acres. And so this project is providing approximately 7.2 dwelling units per acre, which, as you can see, is on the lower end of the allowable density range. And then concurrent with this preliminary subdivision plat is a site plan application. And as you're aware, with our new development code, staff administratively reviews the site plans unless there's a variance involved, in which case we bring it to you with the plat. So that's the background. And then the request tonight is to plat 88 lots on that 12-acre parcel. They'd be individual lots, and they'd range from about 2,500 square feet to about 3,500 square feet. The average lot's about 2,700 square feet, to give you sort of an idea. And their width is about 32 feet wide, and then they're a little bit deeper. They're 85 feet long. Those are the average lots. Some vary. Could be on corners. They might be wider or longer, but that's generally speaking. And so again, as you're looking at the plat here, as you see, they're all individual lots, but every 2 lots will have a building over them, so they'll share a wall. And then, so there will be 44 buildings total within the 88 individual lots. And in the subdivision plat, there's about 2.5 acres of outlots. And the applicant will have a better graphic representation of that. I apologize, my graphic skills aren't the best, but the 2.5 acres of outlots would consist, here's a drainage detention pond down here on the southeast corner, and then there will be various pedestrian connection outlots through here, connecting Olympia Avenue, going north, 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 and so forth. And then here on all the edges of all the lots on the perimeters, they're going to have about, I think, 10-foot wide outlots, and those will all be landscaping. And KB Homes will tell you more about what their thought process was with having all the outlots with open space. And then finally, the pocket park is up here on the north end. That's required for a project of this size. So, and then in this particular development, what you should also know is that the lots are going to be accessed from the alley in the back. So all of these lots, the houses will be right up here on the street face. The setback's 15 feet, so the houses will just be 15 feet, or is it 10 or 15 from the street facade. And then as you can see here, a new public alley is being created, and then you just kind of come in through the back end of all these lots so that they face the street. And so that's the plan for this development. And so I'm going to touch on some of the items in the staff report that our Development Review Committee, our DRC, looked at, our team of staff. We have some folks here tonight too as well, which I'll introduce you. But one of the main issues when we notified the public was everyone wanted to make sure that the design of this project was consistent with the Prairie Village design guidelines that came from the original Prairie Village PUD several years ago. And so we're working through that in the site plan. Don't see any issues there, but that was an issue that was just raised by the neighbors. Another thing is so that we had them do the ecological report because the site's vacant or undeveloped, and no prairie dogs on the property, no federally or state protected species or habitat. But the report did recommend that we do a bird nest survey right before they start grading, just to make sure we're not disturbing any birds' nests should grading occur in the prime nesting season. So we've added that as a condition on the plat. And then as far as tree mitigation, the project is proposing to remove 12 trees. So we gave the tree inventory to the city forester, and he made a determination that they would have to mitigate about 43 inches of tree caliper, or $8,600, the equivalent, the caliper or the money. And so at this time that we had the staff report coming to you, we were still working through the site plan. It looks like the applicant's hoping to provide trees on site, all of it, to mitigate what's being lost. But nonetheless, we just added that in as a condition to make sure that has confirmed that has to be handled with the final approval of the site plan. And then finally, there were just a couple of public works items that, again, weren't final resolved at the time of our staff report. One had to do with the under drain system, and it had not yet been confirmed yet whether where the under drains would go to and whether it would be acceptable to the Prairie Village Homeowners Association that's established. And so I received, and it's on your dais, a letter that came in after your packets went out from the HOA stating that they approve of the proposed underdrain discharge system within their HOA. But nonetheless, we added it as a condition. Our Public Works engineer, project manager, she asked that you put this as a condition just to confirm that that's got to be handled at the time of final plating and public improvement plans, which would come next if this is approved. And finally, a water line easement was proposed along Alpine Street. And at the time that we were writing our staff report, they weren't 100% certain that it was exactly where it needed to be. And our Public Works engineer thought maybe we may possibly, not for sure, but may possibly need additional right-of-way. And if so, we could get that from the final plat, and that wouldn't affect these lots so much per se, but we wanted to add that as a condition, that they take care of that through public improvement plans. So now I'll walk you through our public input process. So we had a neighborhood meeting in May of 2018. There were approximately 35 people there. From the notes, there were no major objections that we noted in the notes from the neighborhood meeting. It was mostly questions about the price points and the drainage and whether there'd be basements and parking, was there ample parking, and whether a street and a traffic light would be warranted at Highway 66 in Alpine. So just general questions. And then they submitted the application in July, and so we sent out notices again to a 1,000-foot radius. I think I got one phone call and 11 emails. Some are related to traffic, and some are related to fencing, which has been resolved by the applicant. And then and architectural design, and just making sure, again, people were concerned that it would be consistent with the Prairie Village Master Design Plan. And then finally, we sent the notice out on April 2nd, and also obviously signs were posted. We got 2 letters in support and a phone call that it was just general questions about how many lots and what, how does that look. And so again, I got those 2 letters in support after the packets went out. So those are in your dais. I don't. The HOA one is necessarily in support of the project. It was in support of, or they approved the underdrain system. And so just in sum, just kind of going through it all. So again, the density that this subdivision plat is proposing, it does align with the zoning and the comprehensive plan. The school district weighed in and said the feeder schools can accommodate the capacity that's coming from this, and that's in your packet. There's no variances requested to our codes with this plat. We did get a traffic study. At this time, there's no warrants for a signal at Highway 66 in Alpine. However, maybe after this development is constructed, our traffic engineers can revisit that and take some more traffic data. Carolyn Michael and Tyler Stamey from Traffic Engineering are here if you have any questions about the traffic study. And then in terms of traffic mitigation, there's a mid-block neck down on the plat that you've got in front of you that's proposed on Alpine Street to slow down traffic coming from Highway 66 or maybe approaching it northbound. And then there's a speed table proposed on Whistler Avenue between Canadian Crossing and Alpine to slow down any traffic zipping eastbound. And then again, access to the homes. Vehicle access is going to be through public alleys that will be dedicated to the city, and that will leave up a lot of street parking on all the perimeter streets of Alpine, Olympia, Canadian Crossing, Whistler, Winding, and their new street, Yukon. So that should open up a lot of guest parking on the street. So at this time, staff's recommending approval with 5 conditions that are in your packet. Again, just reiterating that the site plan has to comply with the Prairie Village design guidelines that the neighbors requested. That we finalize the tree mitigation before the grading permits are issued, whether they pay a fee or provide the additional trees. That we get a bird nest survey from the applicant about a week prior to the start of grading. And that the final plat needs to provide sufficient right-of-way dedication for that water line easement on Alpine Street. And if you have more questions about that, Chris Huffer, our engineering administrator, is here to answer any questions about that. And lastly, again, that the under drain system discharge, the way it's set up, that it satisfies our DRC at the next level of review and public improvement plans. And again, you have the letter from the HOA. They say it's fine with them. And again, Chris is here to answer any questions about the under drain system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris March, and he'll be representing the applicant and doing the presentation for you. And then we'll be happy to take questions, technical questions.
All right. Are we there? Thank you. My name is Chris March. I'm with TCK Design and Planning. So I wish I could say this presentation was all original material, but it's a lot of what Ava said, and so we'll just be going through that, providing a little bit more detail for you, hopefully clarify anything, and then we'll take questions at the end. So let's go to the next slide. So just to give you an idea of what the product looks like, I know we were kind of talking just more site plan in the plat. This is an example of a typical paired home. So they're single-family paired homes, like Ava said, they're alley loaded. So there's also two-car garage, and all the alleys face. There's no alleys or no garages that face the street. Everything's facing the alley. So on the second one, there'll also be 5 different floor plans, 14, which creates 14 different building combinations. Each paired home has a private side yard, and so that's what they maintain. Outside of that private side yard, it's all HOA maintained. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the site plan. So here's the overall site plan. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of background, when we first met with staff and had our pre-application, and we started talking about what everyone was looking for, some of the guidelines we were going for was having, I'll use the pointer here, having Whistler Drive here meet to the east parcel with the co-op, so have that road alignment. Provide access to this north parcel that's not a part of our site, so that's where Yukon Drive came in, to provide access to any possible future development there, so it's not off Highway 66. All the lots face a right-of-way. There's no dead-end alleys, so we reconfigured that to meet city requirements. Up here we have our 0.88 acre pocket park. And so we really wanted to look at tying that into the existing open space and providing that trail connection along Highway 66 to get over to Alpine Street. And then the big thing too is we have more outlots than typical. And one of the things that we looked at was the aesthetic of the project and when you're coming in along Whistler Drive here. And the idea is we didn't want to just have your typical detached sidewalk and then a fence right on the back side of that lot with nothing in between. So we wanted to pull that side yard. I can zoom in a little bit here. We wanted to pull, and so when you look at these graphics, keep in mind that these are showing the full right-of-way. It doesn't show that within that there's the street section, there's the detached sidewalk and a tree lawn. But this just, since it's the plat, it just shows the line work of the full right-of-way. And so what we are doing here is just creating these spaces so that we could have landscaping there when you're coming in that's HOA maintained and provide a little bit more separation to those private side yards. Let's get all the way back out. All right. So as far as so now I'll get into the review criteria and how we met those. And so with review criteria A, it talks about being the application being consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so what we did is that, and Ava brought this up, so the RMNU zoning provides 6 to 18 DUs, and we're at 7.2, so we're on the lower end of that. And then also, that's been brought up many times, is making sure that the architecture is consistent with the Prairie Village design guidelines. So for review criteria B, this talks about getting applicable with the standards and utility design. So this one we have, so like Ava said, we have the private alleys in the back that's a little bit lighter gray. And so we're able to provide, so we have vehicular access to the backside of all the units for the alleys. All streets are going to be built per Longmont code. And so the main drives here in the darker gray, and you'll see on the next slide. So it's a 61-foot right-of-way. Parking's provided on each side, and the profile has a detached sidewalk and tree lawn. And then, as you can see here, there's adequate utility service to all the lots. So the water is coming from the streets, and then the sanitary sewer is coming from the alley side. This is the typical street section. So as I've been talking about this, so you can see it's a 61-foot right-of-way. So there's 10-foot driving lanes, parking on each side. There's the tree lawn, and then the detached sidewalk. So even though in the graphics you see gray, this is actually the profile of what it will look like when it's designed and built. So with criteria C, it talks about being comparable or compatible with the surrounding properties. And so this, and Ava already brought this up, so we have the single-family detached development to the west. We have single-family attached down to the south. We have more single-family detached to the east. And then this is that 3-story, or the multifamily parcel, and then the existing single-family residence that will also be, if it gets developed in the future, will be the medium-density residential. For review criteria D, about adverse effects to the surrounding properties, the traffic control that Ava brought up, so this is where the neck down is along Alpine Street. And then internal to the site on Whistler Drive, this is where the speed table will be. So we have those two traffic calming devices. The vehicle volumes for the traffic report did not warrant installation of a traffic signal at Highway 66 and Alpine Street. I know that's something that did come up in the neighborhood meeting, and so it's not warranted based on this development. And then there are the stop intersections at Olympia and Canadian Crossing, Olympia and Alpine Street, and Whistler Drive and Alpine Street were all found to operate acceptably with this development. So as far as review criteria D and the natural environment, this gives you an idea of, and we're in the process of mitigating the trees. So the trees that are impacted are all existing street trees that are currently out there. And so obviously some of them are impacted by where curb cuts are. The other ones that are getting proposed to be removed is just because they're in poor condition. So when they were evaluated, they were shown to not be, maybe 60% as far as what the quality was. And so then we're gonna replace those. And so that's gonna be a process of meeting with staff and just coordinating. I don't know that we're gonna pay the cash in lieu. I think it's gonna be planting above and beyond. We just need to coordinate that and make sure it's all defined so it's spelled out for everybody. The environmental assessment did not identify any protected species or habitat, and as Ava said, the nest survey will be performed prior to grading. Adequate police and fire protection are available, and then the detention pond here in the southeast corner, that will handle all of our internal stormwater and runoff. For review criteria E, we talk a little bit about the transportation plan. And then, so we have the street connections from Alpine Street. So we have a street connection here, obviously going internal to our site. And then we have 2 on Canadian Crossing. The Yukon Drive is providing the future access to the north parcel here. All the lots are accessible from public alleys. And the red lines show where the detached sidewalks are gonna be. So we do have the one pedestrian connection through here, and then we have all internal sidewalks. It's the detached sidewalk in the typical street cross-section. And then in the blue at the north shows where we're tying into the existing trail. That's gonna provide the east-west connection to get to Alpine Street through our parcel. There's been a lot of coordination with that, where the ideal, what we didn't want to do initially was just have it dead end at a parcel we weren't sure when it was going to be developed. So then we pulled it all onto our site, brought it through our park so we could tie everything in together. Review criteria F, just not limited, we wouldn't limit the ability of surrounding land. So all the adjacent land has been annexed into the city. And then the creation that we've mentioned in the previous slide of Yukon Drive provides the future connection to that out parcel. Review criteria G, we're not creating lots that are undevelopable. All the proposed lots meet subdivision regulation standards, and they're adequately sized to provide space for the building footprint and meet all the required setbacks. And then review criteria H, proposed phasing plan, there's available infrastructure to accommodate all the units at once. I'm not sure if it's gonna be taken down in any other way at this point, but there's enough facilities to do that. Go to the site plan, and if there's any questions of clarification that anyone has, I'd be happy to address those.
Thank you, Mr. March. Commissioner Height. Okay, well, so unless it's just a question that's technical at this time, just for a quick clarification, we can wait until after the public hearing.
It is technical.
Okay.
Mr. Marsh, and Planner Parashevsky and Attorney May, it's kind of a 3-part question. Excuse me. The conditions of approval that are being proposed, the Prairie Village Design Guidelines, the nest survey, the tree mitigation project, and the public works issues. My questions are, who's going to approve each one of those? I'm assuming the Prairie Village Design Guidelines are going to be approved by Prairie Village HOA?
So, Chair Shernick, if I may, Commissioner Height, staff would be reviewing and approving those on behalf of the commission, as we do with all of your conditions on all projects.
And why can't that be done now? What are we waiting for?
Which part, sir?
The approval of whether or not this project meets the Prairie Village Design Guidelines. How come we don't know that yet?
We don't know that quite, well, it's almost there, but the site plan is not approved yet, so that's why. We're doing the site plan review concurrent with this.
So
But
is it-
we won't give it final approval until this is approved and a final plat and PIPs are submitted, and then we review that against the site plan, make sure everything matches, and then we're also reviewing the design guidelines as well through this process. And so far, yes, everything does match the Prairie Village Design Guidelines. Just to give the public a level of comfort, we wanted to add that condition.
Okay. My next question is, what happens if the nest survey shows that there's a nest?
So if the nest survey shows that there's a nest, they won't be able to start grading work until we evaluate that further to determine how far those nests are and whether they'd be disturbed, and then whether additional permitting would be required, if at all, through the state.
Would that jeopardize the approval that we've granted already?
It wouldn't jeopardize the approval because theoretically this project would be approved because they can't apply for a grading permit until the project is fully approved. The final plat has been recorded and the public improvement plans have been approved and a public improvement agreement has been executed and securities have been posted.
So we're approving this is not a preliminary plat, this is a plat.
This is a preliminary plat.
Preliminary plat.
Yes.
Okay. The tree mitigation issue, I think I understand you're close to having that figured out. And that doesn't concern me terribly much to have staff review that. But the public works issues, which then dovetails into Attorney May's question from me, which is, are we over-delegating our review responsibilities to a staff approval at some later point in time?
Chair and Commissioner Height, Eugene May, City Attorney, what aspect of your approval are you delegating?
Does it meet the design guidelines? Well, staff's going to make that determination. If there's a nest that's identified 10 days before grading, you know, what conditions have to be met at that point in time. Tree mitigation, I don't have a problem with, but the public works easement issues that they get worked out, I probably don't have a problem with that. But it seems to me that there are certain uncompleted issues here that are being delegated back to staff to make a determination on? And is that an over-delegation of our authority to approve this plat as having met certain conditions when we don't really know if it does?
That's a compound question. I mean, it's a conditional approval on conditions. My understanding of the development process is these are tasks that staff routinely completes. I imagine it's within the commission's authority to have those come back. But I don't think they are being over-delegated if there are criteria by which staff is to apply those conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Eva, and possibly Mr. March, quick question about the northeast corner of your property. There's a little notch right there. What is not in your property there?
Right here?
Yes, exactly.
That's there's existing landscaping there. It is an out parcel that's a part of, I can't remember, I was looking at the plat the other day, and so it's not a part of our site, no, but it's like the entry monument and landscaping for a different filing.
Ah, okay, so it basically would never be developed. So you're not making it undevelopable.
Correct. The existing landscape our landscape will actually tie into that existing area.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yeah, I couldn't tell what it was, so thank you for that explanation. Let's go ahead. Commissioner Oneran.
I have a question about condition number 5. Isn't that redundant? That is to say, at the time of final plat, the public works need to be satisfied anyway, right? Why are we doing that as a condition?
Commissioner Honoran, so Public Works, the Public Works engineer who is reviewing this with me, requested that this condition be added. She just wanted to make sure, yes, it is true, the under drain system has to be approved to the satisfaction of Public Works. That is true. She just wanted to make sure that that was formalized because it had not been, I guess, completely resolved at the time that we got this ready for staff report.
Okay, let's go ahead with the public hearing part of this. So thank you, Mr. March. I'm sure we'll have more questions for you.
Great, thanks.
If anybody in the public would like to come forward and comment about this project, nobody has signed up, but you're certainly welcome to come forward. We'll give you 4 minutes of a green light, 1 minute of a yellow light, and then I'll cut you off at the end of 5 minutes, but I'll do it nicely. So please come on down. If you do want to speak, give us your name and address for the record. Anybody? This is the only time that you would have to speak on this. Once I close this, then that's it. Okay.
Yeah, Todd Wilderman, 2342 Whistler. My comment would be, it seems like your architectural designs are pretty good. I think it's going to be a pretty good fit. And you were saying that you're ending up with 14 building combinations, is that correct? 28. Right. I would add that it would be great if you could come up with more paint color combinations. We've seen in some of the other parts of development where the paint schemes keep getting repeated. And as you stand in certain parts of the neighborhood, you can see 5 or 6 houses that have the same paint scheme as it goes throughout the whole thing. So That's the end of my.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, my name is Justin Stober. I'm the president of Prairie Village Homeowners Association. I will say that the Homeowners Association in Prairie Village is in support of this development. I will say that in response to that comment, I want to make sure that we don't have another Fall River. We have a lot of neighbors and homeowners that are very dissatisfied with that. So if there are any other paint schemes or color schemes, I would request that that get vetted. In general, I will say that the development and the engineer, it was hard to hear people, but now I understand why, have been very responsive and have requested the input of our association and our homeowners. I believe that they've had more meetings than required. I'm very impressed with the level of back and forth that we've had. In general, we're, like I said, very much in support. I will say in response to the under drain issue, that is also something that we're in support of. I personally have reviewed the calculations. I am a registered professional engineer, geotechnical engineer. This is what I do for a living. Our under drain can absolutely support this addition. I have to say that in the stance that I'm the president of our HOA. I am not a consultant for our HOA. But my professional opinion, I would be happy to put it on record that we can handle the under drain connection at Olympia and Alpine. I believe that's pretty much everything I have to say, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stober. Anybody else? Okay, seeing nobody else coming forward, we'll close the public hearing and go back to discussion amongst the commission. Commissioner Poland.
Ava, during the neighborhood meeting, there was a question. What percentage of the homes will be dedicated for low-income housing? And the answer was basically, this is being discussed currently by the city, I'm paraphrasing, by the city council and whatever. My question is, how does the city ordinance that has been enacted affect this development?
Chair Shernick, Commissioner Poland. So at the time, our affordable housing ordinance hadn't been adopted. The current standard is you have to provide 12% on site to be deed restricted, or you could pay a cash in lieu. And so I'll turn it around to the applicant because I'm not sure which direction they're going to go. We were going to work that through during the final plat. So anybody, Corey, anybody you want to come on up? So
Corey Hunsitter with KB Home, 7807 East Peak View in Centennial. So right now we're planning on paying the fee in lieu, the $790 a square foot.
I have a question for Tyler Stamey, our traffic engineer. Give him a chance to get down here. Good evening, Tyler. How are you?
I am well. And
Good. Question about traffic warrants, because we have people from the neighborhood and we go through this a lot in terms of trying to understand why traffic lights don't go in. And I know that you have a grading system for intersections, like A through D. Maybe there's an F. Can you walk me through like Alpine and 66, but also what else you got through your traffic study in terms of like the grading system for those intersections, so that we know like how close are we to eventually maybe that intersection warranting an upgrade in its traffic?
Chair Shernick, so this is an intersection that I would actually really like to install a signal at. It's one that I think there's a lot of benefit to the community for doing, both the neighborhood. I know RTD's got a bus route and they've asked for a signal at this intersection. Unfortunately, it is on CDOT's road. So State Highway 66 is CDOT's, and there are minimum volume thresholds that have to be met before a warrant's approved. It would be, even if the city installed the signal, maintained it, operated it, it'd still be owned by CDOT. So they want to know that that warrant is met before they're willing to take that on in that liability. From a perspective of if and when that would be installed, yes, I think it can be installed. It meets all the spacing requirements for CDOT, so it's got that going for it. CDOT's currently working on a planning and environmental linkages study on Highway 66, and tomorrow night they've got a meeting in Longmont for their access control plan, and I believe it will show ultimately a signal at this intersection. So that's all going in good favor for a signal here. If I had to guess, I'd probably say 3 to 5 years is about where I would ballpark that warrant being met.
Can you, for the benefit of our visitors tonight, do you know the information of where and when that meeting is? Because some people might want to go to it.
Yes, I can pull it up here real quick. Tomorrow night, it's at Longs Peak Middle School. And let me get the time here for you. Bear with me. Sorry. Loading up here.
So while it's loading, just to clarify, CDOT is basically doing a study of the entire Highway 66 corridor, right?
They're looking at it, all of 66 from Lyons out to Platteville.
Okay.
So it's 5:30 to 7:30. Tomorrow night, Longs Peak Middle School, 1500 14th Avenue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tyler. Thanks for explaining that. Any other questions or discussion? Concerns? Commissioner Poland.
I want to say that after reviewing this looks like it's a nicely planned development. It looks like it fits in well with the other areas that it's being developed around. I do want to commend Mr. Marsh on a great job of presentation. He did step through the conditions, the criteria evaluations, conditions A through H. I do find that after his testimony that I do agree with him that they do meet the criteria A through H. So at this time, what I would like to do is I would like to go ahead and move that we approve PZR 2019 5B with the conditions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as stated in the document.
Thank you, Commissioner Poland. We have a motion on the floor to approve PZR 2019-5B. Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, I'll second that motion. Excuse me. Excuse me. The reason why I'm seconding that motion is because of the reasons that Commissioner Poland had outlined already. Please excuse my cough. This does look like this looks like it'll be a valuable project. It's an attractive project. My favorite word to hear from the HOA most impacted by this, by an upcoming project, is that the developer has been collaborative, cooperative, responsive. These are words that you don't always get when you have the HOA of the neighboring property or those impacted in the room. So I appreciate that to the team, and that helps us move forward confidently and excitedly to approve this. For all the reasons that were outlined in the city's deck, criteria A through H, because those were approved, because we have the likelihood of a signal coming down the line per traffic engineer Stamey, and because we've had the applicant be responsive to the concerns of the neighbors, I'm excited to move forward with this.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldberg. So we have a second by Commissioner Goldberg of PZR 2019-5B, the motion to approve that. Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, just one final question. I wanted to touch on a comment that came up by Commissioner Height. Whenever Commissioner Height offers feedback, it really, I chew on that for a while. He brings great perspective to this commission. I'm not fearful that we're over-delegating our responsibilities here. I think in reviewing the conditions that we have, what do we have? We have, sorry, 1 second. I turned my page and let's see. One of them was, of course, handling the tree. meeting the requirements for the tree mitigation. I think the staff is completely capable at handling that. The public works needs, I don't think we should be handling that. I think I'll turn to the Public Works Department to confirm that that's met conditions there. I do see the redundancy outlined by other members of the commission, but for the sake of this discussion, I'm fine with confirming that, passing that on, and I'm sure it'll get the green light at the end. Let's see. The other recommendations, the other conditions included the environmental study and checking for nests. I don't think that needs to come back to us. If the staff investigates and determines it clear, then I'm fine with that. I do wonder if if there should be clarity on what if there is a nest found. Is it laid out clearly? Is that study done again 30 days later or what have you? But we don't want any surprises day of if a nest is discovered. So as long as the developer or the applicant and staff have been clear on what would happen in the event that there is a nest there, then I'm cool with that. So I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner Haight.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldberg. In re-reviewing some of the staff report, I think there's indication that the Prairie Village design guidelines had been met. At least there's indication in the verbiage that staff had reviewed that. So I'm not so sure that's a necessary condition of approval, but I don't have a problem with it. The tree mitigation problem, I think, is probably an appropriate staff determination. I'm still a little troubled with the bird nest issue, but if I'm told that it's a normal staff decision, I'll sign off on that. One thing, Mr. Marsh, I did want to talk to you about, there is indication that with your lots on Alpine Street might have to be reduced in size to accommodate an easement that is required for a new water line, because the water line that's there you can't tap into. Could you come back and explain to us how that's going to impact your project, if at all? Or not, Mr. Marsh?
Stephen Douglas with Caliber Engineering. I'll try and address your question for you. So there is, like you said, a transmission main running in Alpine Street that we cannot tap into to service the lots along Alpine Street. So that's going to, there we go. So that's going to require a parallel 8-inch water line running adjacent to that. So one of the issues we've been working with Public Works on is the final placement of that water line and the required setback from our proposed water line to the existing transmission main. As that existing transmission main location is finalized, and we have further discussions with Public Works as far as how close our proposed water main can or cannot get, that may dictate moving our proposed water line west slightly to meet the required setbacks. And that's just an issue I believe that is still we're working with Public Works on.
And if your 12 lots along Alpine there had to be reduced in size, will that work?
Chris?
So yes, and it may just depend on which types of lots. So if we go, there's some bonus material back here. Where was it? Oh, here we go. So of the lots, of the building floor plans that we have, these start to show what the depths are. So we have different depths on different models. And then what we actually have along, per code, it's a 10-foot building setback in the front. But what we actually have is there's a 7-foot easement on the backside of the walk, and then another 5-foot gas easement behind that. So we're already 12 feet back. So we can use a different combination of units or restrict the type of floor plan that might go there to accommodate that, depending on where it falls. So we don't really have the geometry yet of where that is to know, but once we determine that, we'll be able to adjust it accordingly. And then even with our typical floor, we have an extra 6 feet in there that we don't usually have with these templates, so we have some wiggle room we can slide some units back and just provide a bigger setback in the front. So we can make adjustments accordingly.
If you're okay, I'm okay. And then the last issue was, and thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Marsh. I think I agree too that the under drain easement issue is appropriately dealt with by Public Works and the president of the HOA. Thanks.
Any further discussion? I'll throw in my 2 cents. I do really appreciate the applicant making sure to thread that trail all the way across their entire project. They did not have to do that, but I appreciate that they did, and it's very forward thinking in that regard. So thank you. Seeing no further discussion, let's take a vote. Okay, that passes 6 for 0 against and 1 Oh, it didn't, oh, you're not abstaining? Oh, I was gonna say you abstained. So, is it for or against? Okay, so passes 7-0. Commissioner Flake is also a yay. Something's wrong with the button that she has on her thing. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. Okay. Okay.
Tomorrow night's open house is 4:30 to 7:30, so.
Okay, 4:30 to 7:30. Okay, for that open house on Highway 66. Thank you. So our appeal process announcement. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, April 18 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, April 24 at 5 p.m. To the applicant, thank you very much for coming and showing us the project. Ava, thank you very much for walking us through it. We'll move on with the rest of our agenda. Let me just get back to it. Next item on our agenda is a final call for the public invited to be heard. If anybody is in the audience, once everybody leaves here, if anybody in the audience would like to come forward and speak about something that's not on the agenda, please do so now. Seeing nobody coming forward to speak, we will close the public invited to be heard. Any items from the commission? Anybody? No? Okay. Any items from Council Representative Aaron Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you, Chair Shernick. This Friday, I'm going to the Transportation Symposium in Denver, and I went last year. I hope some of you, or at least one of you, will be attending as well. I know that Commissioner Flagg went last year, at least for a good portion of it. And it's a really good symposium when it comes to looking at the future of transportation, and especially when it comes to our city, who going through these growth processes that we're going through is an important part of the process of deciding our land use development. So that's just the only thing I want to say outside of, again, as always, thank you for your service to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. Any items from the Planning and Development Services Director, Jenny Marsh?
Chairman Shernick and Commissioners, so we will have a meeting next month. I believe Jane has already sent you an email that will be on the 22nd, which would normally be our 4th meeting. We simply have a couple of items on that agenda that need a little more time, so it will not be our normal 3rd Wednesday. And I'm looking at Jane because I think that's actually, okay. So this is the first year hearing of it. Okay. So that would be the 22nd. And we will have 2 items. And then I'd like to thank Tyler, and as you leave, please thank him for coming on his birthday to Planning and Zoning Commission.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, put it on the record. Happy birthday to Tyler Stamey. So, and unless there's further discussion or anybody opposed, we will adjourn. Thank you.